because there's a lot of weird quirks and edge cases with copy effects that I think if I just kind of sit here and list rules at you will not be a great way to like retain the information. And I think seeing some of that in action will be helpful. But there is still just a handful of things that I want to go over before we get there, just to help get a feel for how like the sort of theory behind VFX. So these next few slides are just going to be kind of bullet points of standalone information that will hopefully be helpful later. So first, copy of an object and the object that it's copying are not linked at all, right? So once a copy effect begins to apply, any further changes to the copyable values of the original object will not be reflected in the copy. You can think of it like once a copy effect begins to apply, it takes a snapshot of what that object's copyable values are as it begins to apply, and then just like puts a sticker on the thing that's being copied. And that's just what it looks like now. There's no live connection or link between those things for the copy to reference over time. Second, some copy effects, like Croaking Counterpart here, specify changes that are being made to the copy as part of the copy effect. So Croaking Counterpart here says, create a token that's a copy of target non-frog creature, except it's a 1/1 green frog. So for the token that you make will be a Runeclaw bear or whatever, but a 1/1 green frog, a Runeclaw frog. And the 1/1-ness and greenness and frogness of the token themselves are copyable values. So if you were to make a copy of the token created by Croaking Counterpart, the new copy that you're making will also be a 1/1 green frog.
The only bad thing about you not seeing my face is the face that I made when Brad said the word frogness. Yeah. Anyway, continue.
Using real words is for the birds.
Or frogs.
Or frogs in the word.
Yeah.
4 cards that enter as a copy of something, such as like clone, for example. The choice of what is being copied is made as they resolve.
Hey, Trailblazer in the wild, thank you so much for the follow.
And so what that means is essentially that, right, so players can't respond to the declaration of what you're copying. I know a lot of times when we'll say like, I'm going to play a clone and have it be a copy of Runeclaw bears. And so technically a player could, before the clone resolves, remove the Runeclaw bear if they didn't want you to copy it. But again, the choice that you make as what the clone is copying isn't made until it's resolving. So once the clone resolves and you've made your choice, there's no interaction point where an opponent can disrupt the copy. Additionally, such cards acquire their new copyable values immediately before entering, and they're treated as always having been that thing. So it's not like a clone enters the battlefield and then becomes a copy of the thing that it's copying. And that's why, like with our adaptive automaton example from earlier, or with like creatures with enter the battlefield triggers, you still get those enter the battlefield triggers or the options to make those choices as they enter. Next, when a copy of a permanent spell resolves, it becomes a token with the same copyable values as the spell you were copying. But notably, this doesn't count as creating a token. So if you have something like a Parallel Lives that modifies the number of tokens you get when you create one or more tokens, those will not apply to a copy of a permanent spell, because the action you're taking is not creating a token, it's resolving a spell. So that one comes up sometimes. Next, let's keep talking about copying spells. Generally, there are 2 ways that copies of spells can end up on the stack. Either you're using something like Reverberate to copy a spell that's on the stack, or you can use something like Mizzix's Mastery that creates the copy of the spell somewhere else and then provides you the opportunity to cast it. So when we're using something like Reverberate, like when a spell is copied on the stack, the action of copying that spell will not trigger any effects that trigger when a spell is cast, because you're not casting that copy. Additionally, if you were to copy something like Deadly Dispute, right, like when you're copying an object on the stack, you're not required to pay the costs associated with casting the spell. So if you copied Deadly Dispute, you wouldn't have to pay another 2 mana or sacrifice another artifact or creature when it's being copied on the stack. Conversely, if you were to use something like Mizzix's Mastery that exiles Deadly Dispute from your graveyard, creates a copy of it, and then tells you can cast it, that action is casting a spell. You will trigger any effects that trigger when you're casting a spell, and you will be required to pay normally. You'd be required to pay any costs associated with it. So if the effect just says create a copy of it, you may cast the copy. You're on the hook for the mana cost, as well as any additional costs that are associated with casting the spell. Something like a lot of effects, like Mizzix's Mastery, say that you can cast it without paying its mana cost, but that only exempts you from the mana cost in the top right corner. If you were to use Mizzix's Mastery to copy Deadly Dispute, you would still have to sacrifice an artifact or creature when you cast it. Next, let's talk about double-faced cards. These things are weird when we start getting into copy effects, because copy effects have a few ways that they can interact with double-faced cards, depending on what the double-faced card is and the nature of the copy effect that you are using. So in a vacuum, normally, the copyable values of a double-faced card are the copyable values of whichever side is currently face up. So if you were to use something like a clone or true polymorph or something like that to copy a double-faced card, the copy is going to be whatever is face up right now, without any consideration to what's on the back. However, with the introduction of March of the Machines incubator tokens can now be transforming permanents. So for us, this means that if a token is created as a copy of a transforming permanent or a transforming permanent spell, then the token will have 2 sides, and each of those sides will have the copyable values of the respective sides of the object being copied. So if you were to use Quasi-Duplicate to create a token that's a copy of a werewolf, that token would get the copyable values of both sides, and it would be a transforming permanent. Such tokens could transform under the right circumstances. And also, when you create a token this way, it enters on the same side as whatever object it is copying. So now note that all of that information that I just told you only applies to transforming double-faced cards. These are not considerations for modal double-faced cards. With modal double-faced cards, you just get whatever side is face up, regardless of what kind of token you're making. Now, there are a few ways to tell whether or not a double-faced card is modal or transforming, but the easiest way I've found is that for transforming double-faced cards, the rules text on at least one of the sides, usually the front side, will reference the word transform or transformed, and the backside won't have a mana cost. And the easiest way, conversely, to tell if it's a modal double-faced card is there will be no mention of transform in the rules text, and the backside will have a mana cost. All this was true, at least, until the upcoming Spider-Man set, which seems to feature a series of modal transforming double-faced cards. Now, typically, I advise not speculating on how new cards or new mechanics will interact with old rules. We could probably make an educated guess about how the rules will interact with copy effects and these new kind of double-faced cards. But obviously, Wizards of the Coast has full control to change the rules however they want, in whatever way they think makes the most sense for what they want their game to be. So what I don't want to do is tell you, this is how these cards will work, and then have Wizards, when Spider-Man releases, have Wizards change the rules for reasons that I'm not aware of. So generally in situations like these, I advise waiting until the release notes are available before making any decisions about how new cards will work. Generally, the release notes will be available about a week or so before pre-release, usually shortly after the full spoiler for a new set is available, the release notes come out. And you can find that just literally by Googling, Edge of Eternity's release notes, and it should be the first or second result on Google.
Yeah. So I just put the Edge of Eternity's release notes in chat for you all there. This is something that judges tend to pay really close attention to, but people outside of the judging, like the judging world, don't really necessarily know about. But it'll get any new mechanics for the set. The release notes will articulate any rules clarifications for those things. If there are any like comprehensive rules changes or clarifications that have been made due to any new cards in the set, they'll include all of that in there as well. So I think it's actually really relevant for just for Magic players who engage with the rules on some level, even if you're not a judge. So
yeah,
definitely check that out.
All right, so I think we've covered I think basically the groundwork that I wanted to cover before we dive into some examples. So the back half of this presentation is going to be very interactive. Like, we're going to be dropping polls, responding to questions. So if you haven't already got chat pulled up, I would recommend pulling it up and be ready to type.